This is Matthew, host of the Superhero Ethics Podcast, and I've got an ethical question for you. If I'm trying to help you not listen to ads, is it ethical for me to do an ad to help you do that? If you go to our website, theethicalpanda.com, and just click on the join button, for $5 a month, $55 a year, you get to hear all of our episodes without ads. Was I ethical in doing this? Let me know. Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today we are talking about K-Pop Demon Hunter. And I'm really excited. I've got returning guest, A.K. Ahab. You may remember them from their episode on Moby Dick, a couple of other episodes that they've been on. The state of California is getting ready to declare that they are a master of philosophy, and perhaps some other great institution soon will be declaring them a doctor of philosophy. But for now, we're going to be talking about K-Pop Demon Hunter from a philosophical background, from an ethical background, in terms of questions of shame and what we hide and what we show to the world. And while neither of us are music critics, we might touch on that a little bit, but we're going to still keep it, keep it superhero ethics as much as we can. AK, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
Pretty well. So before we jump into this movie, what was your background with K-pop and things like that?
Yeah, so I was not super familiar with K-pop. I've heard, K-pop songs, and I like to try and branch out and listen to other genres, but I don't know that I'd ever gotten into it well enough to know specific bands or specific songs.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm generally pretty genre open, so I was kind of surprised and definitely interested by the music of K-Pop Demon Hunters in a very interesting way because I didn't have very much interest in K-pop previously.
Yeah, no, I can totally get that. And I had heard some K-pop songs. Some of them I liked, some of them I was not as big a fan of. I definitely got into ATEEZ as kind of the main band I've really been paying attention to because that's what one of my partners was super into. I found that I knew a lot more about K-pop culture and the K-pop world than I did K-pop itself.
Yep.
And I just want to name that at the beginning because I'll say there have been a lot of great discussions about this movie that really dive deep into K-pop itself and how this movie is very much a commentary on that. There's been some great stuff about how a lot of this movie is drawing on elements of Korean mythology, especially imagery of the tiger and the bird, and also like the Saja boys when they take on their kind of more demonic image, the men with the hats and the way they float, things like that. There's a lot of great commentary on that. That's not as much what we're going to be talking about today. But it is definitely out there and stuff I want folks to explore. But I think it's great that this is a movie that is reaching so many people, both who are huge K-pop fans who were sort of into it or people who knew nothing about it before. And so I'll use that to transition and just sort of ask, so what about this movie really hit you?
Yeah, I think what really impressed me up front about this movie was the kind of full integration of the music into the narrative and moral themes of the story. It's been a while since I've seen a movie that had original songs that integrated them so seamlessly into the themes and was able to do a lot of commentary and foreshadowing about what the characters were actually doing and what was going on,
Yeah.
in a way that felt super fresh and interesting. And I'm also just as a philosopher, the topic of shame and how people deal with shame and
Mm-hmm.
I guess trajectories of evil is what I would say has always been a subject of interest for me. I'm a big Arendtian, so I've read a lot on the banality of evil and kind of how people fall into these actions that are obviously morally atrocious, but it comes from places that are morally complicated and related to things that we all kind of struggle with, and that's what's so scary about it. And so I thought the depiction of shame and the overcoming of shame through kind of an embracing and a recognition was really powerful and moving.
Yeah, there's a lot there I want to get into. First, just on the musical part, couldn't agree more. Though I hope you have also watched Sinners, which to me is the other movie this year that does that so well. And I think it's interesting that in both cases they're not really musicals because most of the music is being performed in the movie itself. We've got the love song performed between Ginu and Rumi, but for the most part, it's also again music being performed in it. And you're right. And to me, so much of that comes down to the song Golden. Because, and let's kind of start there, because Golden is I think it makes a lot of sense that it's the one that's gotten the most nominations so far. It's gotten nominated for not only best song in a movie in the Grammys, but just best song of the year, and I think it might well win. I'm not much into musical theory, but I know that like the singer gets to four different octaves. I mean, she has an incredible range. The lyrics are fantastic, but I feel like a lot of times that song would be the kind of end song. It would be, we've made it. We're not going to worry about being caught in between two worlds or being a problem child. We are golden. We are glowing. We are, look at how wonderful we are. What is it that the movie does that to go beyond that? Because that song comes in the middle, not at the end, where you'd often expect it to be.
Yeah, one of the kind of most immediate things to me when I was watching the movie the first time that kind of put me off from some of the music was that it felt incredibly produced. Like it felt kind of auto-tuned and incredibly produced. And one of the most like revelatory moments at the end of the movie for me when listening to This Is What It Sounds Like was that sense of overproduction was gone and their voices were actually like cleaner and crisper and less auto-tune.
Yeah.
And I think like part of the trajectory between Golden and This Is What It Sounds Like is that Golden is saying all the right things, but what's happening narratively with the characters is that the characters are still like really being pushed and driven by these motives that are not authentic, that are not genuine, that are coming from external places. Like they needed a break and Rumi launches Golden. And so it's saying all the right things. It's um there conceptually, but understanding something conceptually and living it out are two very different things. And I think that's what the movie does a really good job kind of walking us through is like even people who know all these things are still going to struggle with these things because
Yeah.
putting it into real life is a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it because, and especially what you said about being produced. Because, and again, like I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. Auto tune can be really
No, me neither.
problematic. Yeah, Golden is a phenomenal song. I listen to it all the
Hmm.
time. But you're right; it's very produced,
Hmm.
and in some ways, that's again that brilliance you were talking about using the music, where not just the lyrics but the music itself is telling the narrative. To me, so much of this is about that desire to put into the world a very produced image of yourself,
Hmm.
and any of us who do anything on social media, this is what we think about all the time. I want to take a picture from my best angle. When here I am on my podcast, and I'm wearing my Huntrix hoodie because I want people watching this to immediately see I'm a Huntrix fan, and I have my camera angled to catch a particular thing. And I think so much of what this movie winds up being about is, what's that battle between the things we want the world to see and the things we are ashamed of, and how do we move out of that dichotomy?
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think I I thought I knew where the movie was going at a lot of points. And I was happy to find out that I was incorrect. And I think the like hard pivot at the end where like the question becomes what is Rumi gonna do? Um, and she just goes full send on embracing herself and handling the like nobody comes to save her. She just has to
Mm,
kind of um be her, be her or bust.
yeah.
And I think that that was like a really, really concrete and definitive way to kind of say that because it's also nothing at the conclusion has to do with her relationship with anybody else. It all has to do with her relationship with herself to start the process of healing, right? Because
Right.
then her relationships with other people are reunified and brought back together, and that's what ultimately allows them to conquer. Um, but the initial moment is just about her relationship with herself, and so she didn't need anybody else. She was able to do it herself.
No, you're so right. And we'll get into the story with her and Genu, but the fact that he has nothing to do with saving her,
Mhm.
that some of the things that he said are a part of her thought process, but in a lot of ways, if there's any relationship that really matters, it's the relationship with her basically her stepmother, her godmother, who's raised her, Celeste. Am I right? I'm
Mhm.
so about
Yeah.
Celeste, who and let's use that as a way to get into the shame of it all. And so let me kind of back up and say, what do you think this movie is saying about shame?
I think this movie is saying a number of things about shame. I'm trying to think about the best concise way to put this. I think what is uh what this movie is most loudly saying about shame is that shame is not something that can be overcome if it is not addressed. So
Hmm.
there, you can't have, like, shame reproduces itself by the nature of concealing itself, because when you're ashamed, you don't want to expose that shameful thing. So there's no possible way to get at it. And so people get stuck in a cycle. And like, I think it's exposing that particular self generating aspect of shame.
Hmm. I'm going to immediately admit my own shame. It is Celine, not Celeste. I just was
Oh,
looking it up as you were talking. But but no, you're right. And I think that that's in a lot of these movies. There's often a here in superhero ethics, we talk a lot about villains. We talked a lot about like who is the villain, what is the villain of Moby Dick when you were on. We've talked about that with other things, and there's an extent to which with this movie, I was kind of thinking that it would be um like that yes, there's all this stuff about like what our heroes are doing, but then you've got the demons, and the demons are just purely bad. Talk about what it means, you think, that this realization that like the demons are people who are all kind of locked in their shame, and that that's their motivation, and that's what's being used to control them.
yeah. I mean, like I kind of gestured at earlier in the episode, like I'm a big Arendtian, and so for people who aren't familiar with Hannah Arendt, she wrote after World War II, mostly about kind of like the rise of fascism and how everyday people got kind of swept up in the movement of fascism. And obviously, I don't think K-pop Demon Hunters is like going as far as fascism in any way, shape, or form, but you
Mm-hmm.
have these demons that are these embodiments of evil, and what we learn is that they're just people, because
Right.
people are ultimately like the actors who either commit good or commit evil. And the variety of background and the capacity for change always being possible is something that I think uh, is very philosophically important, because in order to hold people accountable, we have to know how to hold them accountable. And if we want a system that doesn't just punish evil, is not just punitive, but is actually restorative, understanding the the situations that lead to the rise of evil in individual humans who themselves we can hold responsible and say are guilty of something, but also
Right.
say have the capacity for growth and change, um, requires us to address those people and to address them as people, which is what happens between Rumi and Genu.
Right. Yeah, I think that is so essential because, and it's something the movie itself is very conscious of, because you think of like when we first get introduced to demons, they're people who, think you water plants with coffee and are monstrous and terrible. But then later, like pretty early on though, we get a scene where Genu shows off what the Saja boys would look like, and there's a couple demons being like, "Yeah, that would work," like in this incredibly human way. And I remember being so struck by that moment. And so the way that they use that idea of shame with demons becomes so important to me because, like, I think one of the things that the movie understands so well is it's not even just that, like, if you let yourself get locked into shy cycles of shame and hurt and things like that, that you become terrible. It's also that you become so easily manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in many ways, one of the most powerful and most revelatory songs, I think, especially because it's so different than things you normally hear, is My Idol.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Talk about that song and kind of how you see it as part of this whole journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think that song, that song to me was like really at a meta level interesting, because it's poking fun, or it's not poking fun, it's a critique of itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's operating as um a really clarifying mechanism about what it is that, not just within the context of the movie, the Saja boys are doing, but what industries are doing and what the world is doing to individuals in an attempt to capitalize off of, engagement of various
Mm-hmm.
forms. And it was really, really pointed, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
playing on people's shame, it's playing on people's insecurity, it's requiring people to kind of oh, you gave me your heart, now give me your soul, right? Like there's a
Hmm.
slippage that happens between the desire for comfort and the desire for community, and then the complete ceding of oneself to something else.
Yeah.
And I think the depiction of that is uh like the song is different from the rest of the songs in the movie. I also think that allows that particular moment to kind of like leave the rest of the movie narratively much
Yeah.
easier and translate to a broader like commentary because it's so pointed.
I think you're so right. And it's interesting you went in the social media direction because I think that is very true. And there's an awful lot there about how we get locked into fandoms or communities or that become cults. But to me also, it was very much about relationships.
Mhm.
And it to me it's about a relationship dynamic that not that I think that this is what the writers had in mind, but that this to me is the symbol of it. Do you remember like 5, 10 years ago when everyone was saying that one of the sexiest relationships in media was Harley and Joker, particularly like the
Yeah.
Harley and Mr. J? And it was so
Yeah.
much about like he loves her brokenness and her wrong and like there is something incredibly sexy about that. There's something incredibly seductive about it. But people I think were finally able to realize, and some of the great Harley Quinn media more recently has really pointed this out, that's a very abusive kind of dynamic where what you're sort of doing is it's kind of a praise by negging of, you know, you're so broken. I'm the one who loves you. I'm the only one who loves you. What's that first line? I'm the only one who loves your sin. Like to me,
Mhm.
that line is just everything of like, this is about keeping you in a shame cycle and making
Mhm.
you think that making you think that I'm going to love you out of it, but actually I'm
Mhm.
just keeping you in it. And it's the
Right.
incredibly manipulative, and not even that I think that it's always intentional. Like I think a lot of times people fall into those relationship dynamics without meaning it on either side because it's all around us in the media. A lot of predators are doing it 100% manipulatively, intentionally to be clear, but it's still there either way, whether it's intentional or not. And that's to me what that song hits so hard on is this idea of when you hate yourself, it is so easy for you to be groomed. It is so easy
Mhm.
for someone to come along and say, not you shouldn't hate yourself because you're wonderful, but no, I love your brokenness, which
Mhm. Mhm.
sounds good, but is also reminding you of that brokenness that you should be ashamed of.
Right. And it's that double tension that happens with shame, which is okay, we need to recognize that people do have flaws. There are some things that are going to need to be corrected, right?
Right.
To be able to have discussions about improvement. We can't just walk around saying that everybody is like operating great, even if they're like a murderer. The question becomes how do you talk about improvement and correction and moving out of a place of like depravity or brokenness if you want to, right? If that's something that you're genuinely recognizing is something that's causing you problems. But how do you talk about those things without recapitulating into this shame cycle that says if you don't move forward, if you like I don't know. It's a very strange line with the morality of shame, right? Because
Right.
there's we don't want to say there's no instance in which anybody should ever feel remorseful or repentful or shameful of their action. But you also can't feel you can't then bury it down and have no other input.
Right. Yeah, I mean I think and I kind of think that's what the point of this in that, cuz Golden is about not feeling shame. It's about feeling like you are wonderful, you are incredible, which is a good feeling and it's not that
Hmm.
people should never feel that,
Right.
but that because like I remember even God, I'm gonna sound like such a fuddy duddy as I say this, but like I have just had a child. My partner's had a child. We are parents together. I love this child. I'm looking at all of parenting, and I don't want to be the person who's like, oh well, now I look at those ungrateful kids by any means. But like even that line where I'm like, I used to be a problem child, but now it's how I'm getting paid. And I had just the tiniest sliver of sympathy for the parents in that moment. And like,
Yeah.
we don't know what it was. And it might be like
Right.
you're a problem child because you want to wear pants and read books instead
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
being a good, wife in training. Or it might be you're a problem child because you want to stay up till 4 a.m. every night. And that's great, but also like we need to sleep here. We don't know.
Right.
It was so interesting to me that I was like, and the fact is so later, um, you know, uh, all three of them sing in that song. Oh God, I'm so bad with names. The song about reclaiming everything. Um,
Uh the last one, the
yeah,
this is what it sounds like
yeah, thank you.
or what it sounds like.
And so in that, what it sounds like, so much of it's about like letting the light hit the broken edge, the jagged edge and things like that. To me, in a lot of ways, what this is about is not fighting shame, but how do you understand shame, learn from it, and then move past it?
Right. And I think the narrative of also forgiveness operating in the movie is a really big portion because it's the okay, actually we can move past this. Like shame can come out, be looked at, addressed, and then moved on from, right? And I think
Right.
the line in the song with Genu and Rumi is another one where it's like, let the past be the past till it's weightless. Like you can address something and then actually move past it instead of holding on to it forever.
Right. And here's what I'll say. And again, this is not about movie critique. I think this is a fantastic movie. I don't think anyone would say it's a perfect movie. I do feel, I think a lot of people pointed out that the ending felt very rushed and that it would have been nice to have some more detail to what happens there. And the one thing that I kind of feel gets muddied somewhat, and so we'll separate them, is for me, there's a big difference between, and I think the movie kind of indicates this, but I wish it had spelled out more. There's a big difference between I have done something bad and I feel ashamed of it, like what Genu feels, in terms of
Hmm.
what he did to his family, versus I have been made to feel shameful about a part of myself that
Hmm.
actually there's nothing bad about. And that's
Yep.
in terms of how Celine makes
Rumi.
yeah, thank you. So but I'm ashamed of my name thing, but I'm not going to edit that out. How Celine makes Rumi feel about being a demon.
Hmm.
What how do you see the differences between, like, we use the word shame for those two things, but they feel fairly different to me.
Yeah. I think the problem is like a historical run, right? So like part of the reason that the part of the reason that the marks on a person, right, are an indicator that like you ought to be wary is because for the rest or many demons, right, that is an
Hmm.
indicator that they did commit some crime and are maybe like remorseful to some degree, but in a shame cycle about that remorse and like
Right.
fully handed themselves over to some sort of evil. The the one of the strong points that this movie makes, I think, is that not all things that are sometimes like there are individual people and you have to address individual people because what something looks like on the outside actually does not have moral implications.
Yeah.
Like you cannot make moral judgments based on people's physical appearances. You cannot make moral judgments based on kind of like rules because boxes are not that black and white. And so while
Right.
the mark shows up on Rumi, right, Celeste does not have the
Celine.
context. Oh, sorry, Celine does not have the context to think through. Um, you know, a baby couldn't have committed a crime. Like
Right.
the mark doesn't mean anything in this context because in this context, the meaning is not actually the warning is not actually being conveyed, right?
Right.
And so the only the only crime Rumi has is being born with a body that's physically different because of her father. And while her father might have some ethical, responsibility for something he did, Rumi certainly doesn't. But
Right.
you do bear the kind of history and lineage of your people, and that's something that uh historically has also been very difficult, right? Like there's a lot of conversations about how white guilt gets in the way of a lot of progression that could happen
Yeah.
in terms of like people being less racist and deconstructing structures of race and patriarchy and male guilt too, right? Like that's
Hmm.
another thing that we talk about and how those structures of shame are preventing progress from happening because we are imposing socially and maybe not but people are imposing socially often upon themselves you ought to be ashamed for XYZ and it's not a actual real productive or
Right.
fruitful regret.
Well, in part because, and I think this is kind of part of what the movie is getting at, especially with kind of like what some of the Saja boys go through, and this idea of being stuck in shame. I think a lot of times, and here I'll just talk about my own experience, but also like having read, White Fragility and things like that talk a lot about this. Um, you know, the conversation will start as white people have done this and you benefit from it.
Mhm.
And most of the time when that kind of critique is being made, especially when it's being made by people of color or white folks who have listened to that and are echoing it, the goal isn't shame. The
Right.
goal is, first of all, just recognize what do I have that someone else might not have. In the
Right.
same way that, like, for me as a wheelchair user, I never want someone to feel guilty about the fact that they can walk up a flight of stairs that I can't. I just want them to think, maybe don't invite me to a restaurant that can go up a flight of
Right.
stairs.
Right.
It's that it, and but the thing is, if I feel shame, then the focus is on me.
Hmm.
It's a there's years ago I was talking to my therapist and I talked about how, like, I had this, I was convinced, this is when I was, my depression was really bad and paranoia and things like that, and every time I had any kind of negative interaction with someone, I was convinced that they hated me. And my therapist pointed out, like, she kind of said something like, you're the most self-centered depressive person I've ever met, because I think that I'm so worthless that everybody in the world is focusing all of their attention on what do they think about me.
Hmm.
And it really hit me hard. And and I think a lot of that kind of shame cycle is very much about that. It's about, like, well, okay, my feelings about what happened have to be here because, and here I'm kind of projecting a bit because they don't really go into this, but, like, so for Genu, he is focused not on the actual suffering that his mother and siblings went through. He's focused on his own guilt and his own
Hmm.
shame.
Hmm.
And yeah, I never even really thought of it in these terms, but yeah, I think you're right. That's so much what this movie is getting at. It's like, how do we get out of that? How do we
Yeah.
get past almost the kind of self-centeredness of
Hmm.
our own shame and be able to look at it from different perspectives and focus more on how are we affecting others?
And it's mirrored, I think, in Rumi too, because Rumi, her primary fear is perception. Like her primary
Right.
fear is how her friends are going to see her. And so she lies to them and deceives them. And ultimately, like, there's this big reveal of a betrayal. And I don't think it would have been like, right? Like if she hadn't been so concerned about perception, there might have been some resolution. And that's what the final song conveys is that,
Right.
why didn't I trust you? Um, and I think those two stories working in tandem in two very different contexts, right? One where a person actually did do something quite atrocious,
Mm-hmm.
and one where they didn't. And
Right.
shame operating in both of those systems, and those two people being able to help one another recognize, even though their situations are different, right? So someone who's actually committed some atrocity and someone who's just ashamed of their existence because of some
Right.
arbitrary reason can actually talk and communicate and share with one another about the nature of that shame and potential like routes to recovery
Yeah. Well,
or
especially because
reconciliation.
I would even say that I think for Rumi, there is something she's done that I think is not great that she feels ashamed of, but it's that she's been told she should be ashamed of being a demon.
Hmm.
And that's nonsense, but she should feel some degree of shame, but I mean, nothing like what Ginu does. It's a very completely different degree, but about, like you said, lying to her friends, stealing couch time from them, which, I'm a big couch person. My partner wants the hat, couch, couch, couch. And again, like she's coming at this all for the best reasons, but she
Hmm.
winds up not only deceiving her friends about, who she is, but, like, leading up to the big awards, part of why they're able to fall apart is that they're already starting to doubt her. They're already starting to worry about her. And
Hmm.
they're always starting to worry about himself because they know something's wrong and she can't tell them.
Hmm.
And yeah, to me, that's a really powerful thing of her being able to say, like, no, Celine tried to make me feel ashamed for these things and I'm going to reject that. And also recognize that I'm not perfect and that's okay. And then I'm not going to try and show the world I'm perfect. I'm going to say, this is what it sounds like when I'm not perfect.
Hmm. And I think that's one of the most I think amazing things about this movie is there are a lot of things in a lot of directions that try to overcorrect for kind of an arrogance that refuses to recognize any flaw, but also try to overcorrect for like a guilt culture that, pursues and is really punishing of any flaw. And this movie walks the middle and it's like, no, we're human. There's a capacity for correction, growth,
Mm-hmm.
recognition of harms caused, and also there's hope and forgiveness and acceptance and love and care. And those two things coexist. They don't exist as like opposite sides of a coin to one another.
Right. And here I think, as I said, I'm not the expert on this, but from my reading and listening to others, I know this is a thing, especially in K-pop, but also just in pop music in general. Like, one of the demographics I think that gets some of the most pressure to present yourself as perfect is female pop stars right now. And that
Yeah.
K-pop, like the academies and all that, are very much about that. But also you look at like, I'm dating myself here somewhat, but for those who are old enough to remember, like when Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera first both became popular. And at first they were both like these like perfect, basically pictures of sexy innocence, and like it was a big deal made about how Britney was a virgin. And they both were kind of like girl next door, super sexy, but not sexual. Um, and that's a whole other thing that's super problematic in all sorts of ways. And then a lot of like, it still is the case today. And then Christina started embracing her sexuality and Dirty being kind of a debut song of that being really important and kind of closed off a lot of things to her, but also opened up because she's awesome. And all that is just kind of to say that I think that choosing female pop stars as the location of this story about needing to present a perfect version of yourself, it is I think really powerful.
Yeah, I think especially because so many young girls and women and people generally hold themselves to the standard of pop stars and media influencers and famous people. And I think
Hmm.
pointing out like no, like these people are also victims of this system.
Yeah,
Like the structures that make all of us feel like shit sometimes for how we present in the world affect everybody, even the people we're holding ourselves as a standard to.
yeah.
Um, and I think that's really, you know, a positive element of this movie as well. It's just because of who they picked as subjects, it works really nicely. And the fans kind of being such a big part of the movie, I think also really like helps kind of bring like a unity to the narrative.
Right. Yeah, I think there's something really beautiful about how it's a battle for the fans, but not just in terms of like we need them to spend money so that we do this thing. It's that we need to inspire this feeling in them. That it's really kind of the battle for hearts and minds
Hmm.
between them and Saja Boys and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the relationship between Rumi and Ginu then, because a lot of these movies, there's going to be a romance, and often it's going to be the kind of the boy from the wrong side of the tracks, the Romeo and Juliet story, and there's definitely an element of that, but obviously it doesn't go in the way that a lot of folks expect. What did you think of this? How that romance story played out?
Yeah, I think the romance story was the part of the movie I was most hesitant slash concerned about going into it, right? Like I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know how it ended. And I was really refreshed that there wasn't even like a conclusion, there wasn't even a kiss. Like there's
Yeah.
very much a flirtation happening, but the relationship doesn't really develop into a romantic relationship of any sort. Um, which I think was a really good way to kind of like open the door to allow us to peek at possibility and also say, realistically, at this time frame for these characters, for this story, this would not be a good conclusion here.
Yeah.
And having the conclusion be that Chinu kind of, returns to the dead and offers his soul to Rumi to like give her strength in her coming struggle and fight is, I think, really poetic because
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't supposed to be in this time. He was supposed to be laid to rest forever ago. Like he now gets to die and allow someone to carry on his legacy in a positive way, which is like the re-healing of the harm he caused to other people is now he's empowering someone to avoid harm, right? Like he's
Yeah.
assisting in someone's struggle against evil. Um, and it concludes in a way that's very clear that like these two characters are very important for one another. They're foils for one another. There's definitely a flirtation, but avoids any of the problematic or not any, but avoids a lot of the problematic conclusions of children's movies that end up putting like someone who's been explicitly abusive or cruel to another individual, often a woman, in a relationship at the end just for the happy ending.
Yeah. I think that's so well said. And I like one thing I've been really struck by. Did you see the movie Turning Red from Pixar?
Yes. Hmm.
I loved that movie and I loved a lot of the discourse about it, especially the way they talked about like the importance of letting like movies about middle schoolers be cringe, and how
Yeah.
boy crazy they were and that was
Hmm.
okay. And one of the things that I saw got talked about a lot then was that often there's a kind of like you're either like that in kind of like teen girl stereotypes, either you're boy crazy or you're the kind of like strong, smart warrior girl who doesn't think about boys and who kind of rolls her eyes at your friend, the sidekick girl who's boy crazy. And to me, not only with Genu, but also with the other two, allowing that, like Mira, one of the most defining, like most quotable lines of that is that, like, I don't want to sit next to what's up? Like, she's so like over the moon over these boys. And there's that great scene where she's like, "You're so perfect, and I'm gonna kill you." To me, that was such a breaking of that. Of like, yes, they can be boy crazy because they're teenagers and they have all the hormones that they have, and those boys have really nice abs and really pretty faces and sing really well. But they're also not going to forget they're demons. They're going to fight them, and they had that tension of like, they're really pretty, but I should fight you. But you're really pretty. But it neither one took away from each other, and that. It's such a dumb thing to find that so revolutionary, but I just have not seen that very many places.
Yeah, I haven't either. And I think it's a part of another element of this film, which is that we had really girly girls kicking butt.
Yeah.
And it's not super frequent, I feel like, that you get girls who are not rejecting any portion of femininity whatsoever, who are also wearing all black leather and killing demons with giant swords, right? Like
Right.
there isn't a contrast, there isn't a dichotomy, they're still themselves. They're not like pretending to be girly girls and then like secretly they're agents, right? Like they are girly girls who are agents.
Right.
And everything about the movie reflects that, and they're having a fun girly pop time in a lot of their fight scenes and encounters. And so there's zero rejection of femininity. It's a full embrace. In a way that I think a lot of times part of the like refusal to let girls have attraction or be boy crazy comes from a place of, if you want to be strong, you have to skew towards the masculine, which is like you have to reject the romantic.
Right. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, that line again early in the song, heels, nails, blade, mascara, fit check from my napalm era. Like it's a great line, but also to me is so symbolic of what that's about. About again, like you said, it's that happily embracing femininity instead of it having to be you're either the girly girl or you're Buffy Summers.
Yeah, and I think like the costume design also did a really good job there because so many of their costumes are actually like relatively practical. Not all of them, right? Some of them are more K-pop stagey, but especially the ones where they're like going and fighting demons and they put on their go time outfit, like they're pretty practical fits. And yeah, they're wearing heels and they're wearing a bunch of makeup and they're wearing like things in their hair. There's going to be some leniency, but for the most part, that's something that looked like you could actually move in, that you could actually like fight in. And the fight choreography was great. Like I had a lot of fun watching those fight scenes, and I'm like picky about fight choreography because I have a background in martial arts. So
Oh, really?
I
Okay.
also thought that was really fun.
Nice. Yeah, no, I thought it was well done. And I'm not generally a fight person. I don't tend to find them very enjoyable, but it felt to me like the fights that mattered, but also that they were very willing to say, like during that last scene, when this is what it sounds like, they're just mowing down armies like some like 80s video game, and it's like,
Yeah.
I kind of loved that because the point was in that moment, it's not about the fight. It's just
Right.
about them finding their way back to each other.
Right. Right. And I think like the musical combination with the fighting and the way that they timed all of that was also really nice because the visual of the fight adds to like the musical emphasis, if that makes
Right.
sense. And I found personally, so I do Taekwondo, which is a Korean martial art, and one of the like requirements for our testing is that we have to come up with our own like form for higher belts and perform it often to music with like a proper tempo. Like tempo and pacing and timing is like a really important part of a lot of martial arts, but like particularly Taekwondo. And I was watching this movie and it's like, man, like this is gonna be awesome for all the young girls in like our dojang who want to do creative forms to songs like this because it's like fully integrated into the structure of their fight.
Yeah. Well, if nothing else now, I want to get you on an episode with Paul, who was my kind of original co-host and has been a co-host at various times, because he has had a multifaceted professional career. But for one point, he ran a Taekwondo school for many years.
Oh.
And also he was in a band, touring in a
That's
band
awesome.
for many years. So yeah, I'm sure you guys could have some great conversations about that. Well, this has been great. I don't want us to go too long, but is there any other kind of elements from the movie that you wanted to bring up and make sure we touch on? And then I have one kind of final question to wrap
I
us up
think we
with.
hit most of my big thoughts. So yeah.
So I'm going to close this out then. It's been a shorter conversation, but again, there's so much great stuff about this movie to check out online. I'm going to post some links to other great discussions. But for me, one of the moments that I loved was early on, where very beginning, where they're kind of doing the exposition, and they show that there have been a version of Huntrix in all these different eras. There's kind of like an Andrews Sisters version, and there's kind of like a 70s girl band, and so to me, the flight of fancy that leads me to is, what if the Saja Boys had come up as other things? And so what if they had been like a Frank Sinatra doo-wop group, or, you know, an 80s hair band? And so for me, my question for you is, what's the time period of boy band that you would most want to see the Saja Boys in, if you do a retelling of this in another time?
I gotta say, I'm a big like Iron Maiden, new wave British heavy metal fan. I would love to
Yeah.
see like the Sasha Boys in that era. I think I immediately thought of the band Ghost, when the Sasha
Mm-hmm.
Boys showed up, and like the song Idol is really similar to some of their themes that they've been doing, and it felt like I was like, oh yeah, like I could totally see how this would work
Yeah.
in the metal genre, and that would be my pick.
That I think would be really fun. Because you could just, the animation of hairography, you know,
Oh
the
yeah.
choreograph and like the martial art of fighting with your hair, but also like, and that's the era in which I grew up. I grew up with a lot of those hair bands, and I've always thought, especially for me, as I've recognized that I'm non-binary and sort of like using makeup more myself and things like that, and that's a whole other story. But like reading more about the history of it, that was this one weird period of time where, yes, a lot of middle America looked at them as all freaks, but like those were men wearing 4-inch platform boots most of the time, wearing tons of makeup, and their masculinity was never questioned.
Yep.
Like, I think that could have been fun if there was something of like, Mira's talking about how she's got to do her makeup, and then like the bassist from the Saja Metal Boys has much better eyeshadow than she does, and like it does,
Yeah.
play with
Yeah.
that some.
Yeah. That would be awesome.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. Where can people find? Let me actually time out. Are you on any kind of like things that I should promote right now in terms of podcasts or social media or stuff?
No,
Okay.
not really. I mean, you could promote my Instagram, which is Iron Kingdom Adventures, but
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this, AK. You're on Instagram. Tell me about it's Iron Kingdom Adventures. Is that right?
yeah, I do fantasy art and fan art, and I do commissions and things as well. So
Awesome. Well, yeah, definitely check that out. Of course, please check out my other podcasts, the Star Wars Generations podcast, the Once and Future Parent podcast that launched recently, where I'm talking about being a parent with 2 other wonderful podcasters and all this kind of stuff. Thank you for listening. Let us know what you think. All the ways to contact us are in the show notes. We have spoken.